How's that? Great. First of all, I did not intend to be so late getting this information to you, and I apologize for that. We had a real short turnaround. I had been planning on having another couple of days, and it just.
Thank you for accommodating an extra.
Sorry.
To prepare all of this.
Well, I
Yes.
appreciate that, Pete. It's just hard for you all.
You have
The-
a lot of credit.
Well-
So I wouldn't worry if I were
Okay.
you at all.
That's
You know,
funny.
In a year from now, it might be a different story.
I'm still in the
Right now.
honeymoon period. It's my first budget. It is a lot of information for you all to digest, but I do want to have you keep in mind, we have 3 days set up, but the timetable, the statutory timetable for having a final approved budget is at least a month away. So we're in good shape. So for that having been said, the revenue budget has a lot of moving parts on it, and that probably, I should say right off the top, is subject to change as a little bit more research is done. The revenue numbers are going to be the most important because obviously that's what that's the budget we're working within. As it stands now, I'm projecting that we'll be bringing in approximately 300,000 more revenue than the total of the expenditure budget that you've received. So there's, what that means is we have at this point in time, we have approximately $300,000 with which to apply to capital projects that are not already part of the expenditure budget. So what I sent you last night, which I didn't make copies of, I'll ask Lori. Lori's going to be coming in here pretty soon with extra copies. And I'll ask her to make a copy of the capital improvement plan that I sent you last night.
Email.
I didn't,
Well, you got one last week, and then there were, I
We
left a
got
couple.
an email last night, 7 o'clock.
Right, and
I check all my emails regularly. I did not get an email.
it was late. It was about 7:30 or so. But Carol, that's okay. There were a couple of changes, and they're highlighted in blue. They're real easy to spot, and I'll have copies for you in just a couple of minutes. The capital improvement plan that you received last week, what the revisions were, I left off some potential equipment purchases for the stormwater plan that's still in a state of flux. It's all very, talk about a moving target. It's a 5-year plan. It's a way to think about how to move forward and what to do with funds that are, if the revenue projections are correct, will give us the ability to go forward in a very organized, practical way to replace, with the stormwater plan to actually go into it in a good, strong financial position so we can make decisions from a position of, thank you, Lori. And if you don't mind, make 16 copies of that top page only, just the top. Great. And those can go to Lisa. Thank you. The biggest capital item on the horizon is the stormwater, what we do with stormwater management. This year, we have a number of other needs, such as in the capital improvement plan, such as buying land, acquiring land on which to put a new public works building. So the capital improvement plan you received last week has, I believe, 400,000 allocated. I just gave Lori my sheet. 400,000 to purchase the land in year 1, which is fiscal 18. In year 2, we have another 500,000 in the revised plan to build the building or construct the building. None of this has been approved. It's just a way of thinking about these are our future needs over the next 5 years. We have now financial information in year 1 with which to possibly make some decisions. So it's a planning tool, essentially. And this revenue budget, this expenditure budget, gives you more tools with which to make decisions over the long term. If we start out in fiscal 18 with potentially 300,000 more in revenue than we're projected to spend, then we can put that entire $300,000 towards the acquisition of the land for the Public Works building, or not. So you see, it just gives you some tools to decide how to move forward.
Bonnie, where does the purchase of the land for the Public Works building, where does that show up? I see where the 500,000 in the year 2020 for the building itself, but I don't see where the land purchase is. And I'm asking that question because that'll help me navigate really all the sheets, because I'll start thinking that way.
Okay, I'm sorry, it's fiscal 19.
This is a revised.
I said it was fiscal 18, but it's fiscal 19.
For
So,
the land.
on this capital improvement plan that you
Yeah.
received last
Just
week,
checking
and then the revised one from last
Oh,
night,
it's right in front of me.
it's
right
land
in front of me.
acquisition.
Yeah.
One of the revisions that I made was to change, we have Public Works Building land acquisition. The second Public Works Building land acquisition should be building. So the revised one I sent you last night has building on it.
And it's right in front of me.
Oh,
I
okay,
see it now.
okay.
Thank you.
Good, sure thing. So, based on how you think about this capital improvement plan, any one of these items, like the Public Works Building, the land acquisition, could be shifted forward. If we find that we have you know, a surplus that you feel comfortable moving forward on, we can shift items in that 5-year plan to make it happen sooner. And I'm sure Dustin would love to have the new Public Works building happen sooner than fiscal 20.
Bonnie, I don't want to unnecessarily confuse things. When we're talking about revenue, a substantial portion of the revenue, as you know, we're presently involved with the fire district fees. The committee's met, and if you talk about confusion, if you had if Webster's had a definition, it'd have a picture of this in the dictionary for confusion. We've gotten, in a week, we've gotten 3 different sets of numbers from the county. But the upshot of it is that, and we're working on this, Kevin and Peter and I are the representatives of the committee. We made the initial disclosure at the meeting last week. We're having a meeting again tomorrow. If the committee accepts our proposals, and we don't have one proposal, but we have a concept, there's going to be a substantial influx of fire district fees, because at the present time, if the council's not aware of this, we're underwriting the fire district, about 60% is in town and about 40% is out of town. The fire district fees are made up of arbitrary numbers, fees, rounded off based upon square footage for both residential and commercial, and for acreage. They were set some time ago, and they're just arbitrary. They're not related to the cost of response or the magnitude of the fire or the intricacies involved in fighting it or anything like that. But just based on last year, the numbers that we got from last year, the last spreadsheet we got was, I think, Tuesday, and the explanation was that the numbers don't agree because the county's using 2 different databases that don't agree with each other. And but from a dollar number, forget about the allocation, the dollar number appears to be correct, so that there's X number of dollars collected within the town and X number from outside the town that's within the fire district. What's happened for 2017 now, that's on a fiscal basis, and we're not on I mean, that's on an annual basis, not a fiscal basis. We're dealing in the town on a fiscal basis. But there was projected for 2018 with Kevin's budget, and you can't really understand this number until he presents his budget, is the town has to underwrite $835,237 of those fire fees. That means our taxpayers are paying by real property tax $835,237. It's underwriting the fire service outside. And 40% of the units are outside. What we had, Kevin and Peter and I have been dealing with and trying to address is how we equalize that. There's several ways to do it, and of course this committee has to agree on how to do it, but one of the difficulties is you're dealing with apples and oranges. You're dealing with a fire fee that's based upon square footage, and you're dealing with real property taxes that's based upon value. So our real property taxes go to make up that $835,000. That represents, according to my figures, that represents about 5.7 cents of our 16 cents. All you have to do is divide 835,237 by 145,511. That means over 5 cents of our tax rate goes to support the fire district that the other 40% is not contributing to. Our objective is to change that and make up that difference, which would mean the town would not have to fund that $835,000 difference through property taxes. So there may be an additional, depending on what the committee finally decides, there may be, right now it's an outflow of $835,000 that we're using to support the fire company that's not supported by district fees. We're trying to eliminate that. And that means that there could be substantially more money available in revenue, because that's not going to be, that expense is going to be covered by additional revenue from the county through the fire district. One of the things that we talked about is limiting fire district fees altogether and just doing it on a tax basis, which would be the
So,
simplest
Bob?
way.
So are you saying that 40% outside the township will pick up the $800,000?
No,
No.
no. Everybody will pick it up to bring it
So you're
even.
increasing everybody's tax.
To bring it even. No, we're not everybody's tax.
Well, no, you
the
gotta
fire
be
district fee.
careful. What you've gotta be very careful about with this is you talk about that will free up revenue to the town. But you're not really freeing up revenue to the town, because people are still paying it just in a different way. I'm saying, I don't think we can use, if we start charging under
Oh,
the
you're
fire
right,
fee,
you're right, you're right.
doesn't mean we can start,
There'd be a reduction in
thinking
real
we have-
property taxes.
right.
The ultimate cost, there is an ultimate cost. I ran numbers on a whole lot of properties and looked at a whole lot of property cards. There is an overall tax cost savings to Sunset Beach taxpayers. It's not significant, it's not hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, individually, it's not hundreds of thousands of dollars. But no, you're right, you're right. It wouldn't be, because what would
it's not
happen
like you
is,
have found money.
what would happen is our tax rate would go down.
We would hope the tax rate goes down. We'd have to do an affirmative thing.
Susan?
Yes, I just, before we get too much farther down this road, this hasn't even passed the state legislature yet, so I don't think
Okay.
it's even prudent to discuss this. I think it's very premature. And should it pass, then we will reconvene to discuss, but right now we need to move forward on the current revenues that we have projected.
that we,
Now, there was an article in the paper this morning, and even the county was talking about that, the sales tax distribution, and how the heck that's gonna get handled, and there's a move
Right.
again to change
and
and that's a significant number for our
Well,
town.
it is.
Carol, I think she started off this conversation, I think appropriately too, because she said that our revenues are a moving target.
Yes.
And it is going to be for the fire fees, it is going to be for the sales tax, but we have to start somewhere, and that's where she's starting.
Exactly.
So it's,
Yeah,
I don't know if
ab-
anybody else needs a copy.
what is the probability that this will
Here, this is
impact
yours, right?
the budget in fiscal year 18?
Well, based on what Councilwoman Scott said, I agree with her that the only thing that however we resolve it, the only impact it would appear to have, the only substantial impact, it would have an impact, but it would be relatively minor. I mean, it might amount to a $300 difference to an individual property owner, or a $150 difference or something like that, but overall,
Is that
Carol's
based-
right.
Is that based on doubling the fire fee?
We're not doubling
Apples
it.
and oranges.
Let's,
Apples and
let's
oranges
take
here.
Susan's advice and get back on track.
Let me actually, well, I would echo Susan's caution about going anywhere with fire fees because it is, talk about a moving target. It's in a great state of flux and it's a whole budget meeting in and of itself
But-
because it
but-
has such ramifications.
But Carol's right. Her point was, it's the same dollars, regardless of how you come about it. It's, so it's gonna be the
It's not
same.
gonna be a boon, an $800,000 boon to
Right.
the fire department.
Exactly.
Right.
No,
So
because
don't count on that.
No, it should be revenue neutral.
Carol's.
I agree.
It should be
Let's,
revenue
let's
neutral.
move, please, let's move forward.
However,
Carol, what
in all fairness to what Bob just said, it may mean that we get a little more of a contribution from the outlying areas not within our jurisdiction, who should be paying a greater
Right.
percentage to cover their coverage.
And this has such a long history, that
Right.
it's going to be, and is currently very controversial, and it has such great ramifications. We're a ways out, probably. Although the heavy lifting needs to happen now, it just doesn't need to happen in this
On the
budget
sales tax
discussion.
thing,
On the
any
sales tax.
sense of whether that will?
Well, the calculations I used were the ones that were put forward by the School of Government, Chris Nida, the tax expert, and the local option sales tax, which is the proverbial football that is always up for grabs in Raleigh. The School of Government projected that the fiscal 17 revenues would be 4.75 percent more than last year, and fiscal 18 would be 4.25% greater than this year. So these numbers for the local option sales tax, which is the first
So
item.
just leave it the way it is and not worry about it right now.
Right, but those incorporate those numbers, and if it changes, we're talking about potentially, a good chunk. At this point, the recommended budget has local option sales tax as just over $1 million. But in fiscal 17, we're projecting also just over $1 million. Every year since they started playing with it, it's gone up. So at this point, there's still, at least the School of Government is still predicting that it will go up. However, anything can happen in Raleigh between now and the end of June.
Well, if they pass the legislation to reallocate it, it'd have a substantial change.
Exactly, it will be. At this point, they haven't done it, so this is what we've got now. And then as soon as they do something, we can make some revisions. Okay, so that having been said, those are the two biggest chunks in the revenue, the local option sales tax and our ad valorem taxes. Just about every other item is projected to not change all that much. If you focus on the last column, which is the increase or decrease over the fiscal 17 budget, we don't have a lot of changes. Actually, I take that back. The local option sales tax, the next big item under there is the utilities franchise tax. That's 37,000. It's almost as big a difference increase over fiscal 17 that they're predicting in fiscal 18. But again, that's the School of Government prediction. So we'll see. We'll leave it as it is for now. There are a couple of changes that Carrie and Hiram can address when we get to the inspections and planning budget, which hopefully won't be today, is planned to be today, relative to the cost of business permits and changes that have been made in the last year, dealing with revenue. So those numbers, the numbers that for the permits and fees section are based on a conservative estimate of Carrie and Hiram's.
I have a question, please, before you leave that page. Excuse me for this, but this is sort of, I need a primer in how to understand what we're doing here. You have a FY17 budget, then an FY17 projected, and I interpret that to mean what you think we're gonna actually spend.
Correct.
Right?
Receive, in this case, revenue.
Okay, receive in this case. and then a FY18, and then your column that seems to be the one that makes a difference is the increase or decrease over the FY17 budget.
Mhm.
It would seem to me, if we're doing planning, that the projected amount should be actually the dollar amount that we're concerned with.
Yes and no.
Not the budget that we've already, you've got projections in here that it's gonna be changed. So I'm just sure, you know, which numbers are the ones, really the key numbers that we should be focusing on?
I would say both, for this purpose, because the last time you all have been, well, and not everybody, but the last time the budget has been part of a substantial discussion before the council was during the last budget season. The projected numbers are projected, they're not actual. So we have to pay attention to them clearly. But in terms of deciding whether the decisions that were made last year, because a budget is a planning document, if the decisions that were made last year need to be changed, revised in some way, this is more apparent with expenditures than it is with revenue, but if those decisions need to be rethought, it would be based on how the new budget compares with last year's budget. The projected numbers are a function of bad projections, better projections, or better reality than the projections, not bad projections. With expenditures, they're also a function of intervening events. In other words, last year in the expenditure budget, nobody foresaw that we would be plonking down $300,000 to take care of the damage from Hurricane Matthew. So the budget is imperfect, almost as imperfect, well, equally imperfect as the projected numbers, because we don't have reality anywhere. We have two.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Bonnie, thank
Thank you.
you for the detailed breakdown in the revenue. I think this is very helpful, and I wish not to get into the weeds, because this revenue number seems to be relatively consistent to last year and the last couple of years. But the question that I have is, where do we reflect the accommodations tax? Now, that's usually around $700,000-800,000
It's
in
in
that
there.
range.
We-
Where is that reflected?
We have a separate fund for the accommodations tax. But
So
part
that's
of it.
not included in here.
Correct. The accommodations tax is not part of the general fund, but what we don't spend against the accommodations money that comes in gets transferred to the general fund.
The general funds,
So I would
thank you.
draw your attention to the last page,
Yeah,
the very last section where it says transfers. Based on, okay, let me also refresh. The tax money that comes in for accommodations tax
Right.
is actually three parts. We charge, on gross receipts for rentals, we charge 6%. 1% is a pass-through to the county.
right.
2% we have to reserve for beach nourishment purposes only. And then the 3% is the accommodations tax,
Right.
which this year I'm budgeting at 600,000, the same as last year. I'm not comfortable, I'm,
There's-
So in other words, it's net after the 1% and after the beach renourishment, there's
Then we have-
approximately 600,000
right.
of,
This should be
The-
reflected in this money. We've never not had a line item.
Well,
for
we
the
had a line,
accommodations.
we have a line item. What I will give you on Saturday is every single one of the funds. We have about 10 different funds. The accommodations tax is one of them. The general fund is the biggest single item, but
I don't-
as the accommodations tax affects the general fund,
see, if you,
that number is,
Hang on for a minute, Rich. My problem with this is, you're saying, you know, it's what we don't spend from the accommodations. But we need to be looking at what we expend. That's just as much a part of our
Right,
budget.
and I'll-
Those items
yes.
that are coming out of that accommodations
sure.
tax used to come out of our general fund. And to argue
Right.
that, you know, that we're not gonna see it or approve.
no, it's
or-
just a timing issue. I'll have it for you Saturday. I have it already.
yeah, no, that's fine. I was just trying to, because if I recall the audit report for
Mm-hmm.
fiscal year 16,
Mhm.
it showed revenues of 6.4 million.
In the accommodations
And
tax.
that must have included the accommodation tax.
Yes, and,
And that's why we had such a wide, I don't want to call it surplus, but variance, the 947,000.
well, and there were other things in other
Okay.
funds that we spent
Yeah,
money
that would be
on.
nice if it was included in here.
It will be on Saturday.
Okay,
I'll
that's
give you a
cool. No,
summary
no,
with
no,
all the
no, no.
funds
All right.
together. The problem
Sorry.
is, we have
No,
a
thank
lot
you.
of numbers to
Thank
look
you.
at.
No,
And
no,
if we
that's
can
good.
concentrate
But
just on
just
the,
another note on this, you know, I know you went to UNC, we have traditionally, and I hope everybody in council will continue with this tradition of being very conservative in terms of what we're assuming we're gonna be getting in revenue.
Mhm.
And I'd rather us be extremely conservative and find out that, no, gee, those numbers were up during the year, than say, oh, yeah, we think it's gonna be that, and it turns out to be, you know, $100,000 less.
right. We do have, there's about at least the 5 years that I looked at, we're consistently bringing in more revenue than we have budgeted. This budget, we can look again at the two,
If you realize that there's a very good reason for that.
Mhm.
God forbid, you
No,
know,
no,
you
no,
have a storm, you know, a major hurricane season. People aren't
Exactly.
coming, they're not gonna be spending money, we're not gonna be getting accommodations, we're not gonna be getting general funds. I mean, we have to be
Right.
careful.
so, and that's why I kept the accommodations tax money the same as what we're projected to have
Okay.
this year, 600,000.
Susan?
No, I was just trying to get us back on
Yeah.
track. As you can see from our agenda, the accommodations tax and the beach erosion control fund will be discussed in its entirety on Saturday.
Okay, and
What's your goal for today?
That agenda right there.
Okay, so what's the first thing you want us to talk about?
revenue.
Revenue.
Why don't we can wrap up revenue with, in just a couple of minutes, if, let's just go back to the accommodations tax. That number, what I'm anticipating, which you'll see on Saturday, the basis for that anticipation, is that we'll receive a net of almost 400,000 from the accommodations tax to the general fund. So this budget assumes that we will spend 200,000 in order to maintain the beaches from the accommodations tax. And then at the end of the year, approximately,
But that money may be part of general fund, but it's very restricted in how we can use it.
exactly.
You can't just say, oh, you know, that money's sitting there, therefore we don't need it somewhere else.
No, no,
You
no,
can't-
no, not at all.
That are shown directly against the accommodations tax in this packet.
Right, and that's what she's pulling out of it.
Things for the beach patrol.
Right.
Yes,
Mhm.
but we're not,
Right.
we haven't gotten to that yet.
So we will on Saturday. So if we just leave that, set that aside for now, we'll go into great detail. And as we can do with all of these revenue numbers, we can look at, you know, much more closely at the assumptions behind them. Again, just in closing, the two main items, the ad valorem taxes and the local option sales tax, we already discussed that the local option sales tax is a school of government prediction, which may or may not come true, based on what happens in Raleigh. And the ad valorem taxes, just so you know, is also conservative. It's based on the property value of, at the end of fiscal 16, less the anticipated collection rate, or the gap in the
When you
collection rate.
show an ad valorem for prior year, are those just delinquent, are those
Yeah.
late paid?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and we do, you can see across the board, it's, you know, 30, it fluctuates between 35, 50,000. It's a number we can't control,
Sure.
because the county does collect those. So, and motor vehicle tax is
So-
just,
So
again,
for purposes today, we're gonna limit our discussion on revenue, if there is any more, to the line total before transfers.
correct. Mhm. I'm there, unless you all have specific questions, I don't have anything more substantial to point out about the revenue numbers. Actually, let me rephrase. The top of the second page under sales and service, the recycling program is a pass-through. It costs us, you know, roughly 45, 50,000 to administer the recycling program, and we take in 50,000 in fees. So there's no net, or there's very little net gain. There's a small administrative fee.
Bob, I have no other comments on the revenue other than the clarification on
Transfers.
the accommodation tax. This looks, to me, relatively consistent.
Anybody else have any other questions on the down to total before transfers?
No, no.
I have one more thing, sorry. Disaster recovery, which is towards the bottom under miscellaneous. There's a $269,000 entry, and that is the amount that we will be reimbursed from, that we're anticipating being reimbursed from FEMA. So that
Eventually.
again is also subject. Eventually, but sometime in the next year, and they appear to be on track.
Oh, okay, that's
that
good news.
tax.
And I have an
Yeah.
update, a
Yay.
brief update.
Yay.
Again, I have the agenda.
Yeah.
Is I just signed the reimbursement forms for Category A last week. I have FEMA coming in tomorrow to look at our completion of our projects, to take pictures. We have 2 more categories that we have to submit. I'm hoping we get those by the end of the week, so we will have submitted all the reimbursement requests for our 3 categories in which we are eligible for. Now, again, eligible, they'll review it, and they'll either give us the full amount that we're requesting, or they'll, they have questions. They always do, so. Always do, so.
They have to justify their existence.
Well.
Yeah, if they earn their
I
money,
won't make
yeah.
that